Some people say fear comes from what we see. Others know it comes from what looks back. This is the story of the man without a face. A presence that does not chase, does not speak loudly, and does not need permission to stand close. Listen carefully, because once you know about him, you will never look at your own face the same way again. Chapter 1. The Man Without a Face. In the eastern outskirts of Thailand's Ubon Ratchathani province, there is an old dirt road that cuts straight through an abandoned rubber forest. The soil there is red, thick, and damp, as if it never truly dries. Locals avoid the road after sunset and refuse to speak its real name. Instead, they call it Thanan Mai Mi Na, the road without a face. The name did not come from superstition alone. It came from what people saw there, and what was later found. The first recorded incident happened more than 10 years ago, though villagers insist it began long before anyone dared to document it. A long-haul truck driver, returning from Laos, took the road as a shortcut shortly after midnight. According to the police report, his truck stopped suddenly at exactly 2:13 a.m. The driver later claimed that his headlights caught sight of a man standing directly in the middle of the road. The man did not move. He wore an old white shirt, buttoned all the way to the collar, and dark trousers stained at the hem with mud. His posture was unnaturally straight, as if he were being held upright by something unseen. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about him, until the driver noticed the face. Or rather, what should have been a face. Where the eyes, nose, and mouth should have been, there was only smooth, pale skin, no scars, no wounds, no features at all, just a blank surface, like wax before it is shaped, faintly reflecting the truck's headlights. The driver froze. He later said that the most terrifying part was not the absence of features, but the certainty that the man was looking directly at him. The engine stalled, the lights flickered, and in that brief darkness, the driver felt something change in the air, as if the forest itself had leaned closer to watch. When the truck was found the next morning, it was parked at the edge of the forest. The doors were locked from the inside. There were no signs of a struggle. The driver was dead. His face was missing. Not torn. Not damaged. Simply gone. From that day on, the road was no longer considered empty. Something walked there now. And it did not have a face of its own. Chapter 2. A Death Without a Cause. The official report listed the truck driver's death as unexplained. That single word was repeated again and again, as if saying it often enough might eventually make it true. The autopsy revealed nothing that could satisfy logic. There were no signs of poison in his blood, no trauma to the skull, no damage to the brain. His heart, lungs, and organs were intact, as though his body had simply stopped obeying the rules of living. But it was his face that no one could explain. There were no cuts along the jawline, no torn flesh, no blood beneath the fingernails. The skin from his neck upward had vanished with surgical precision, leaving smooth muscle and bone beneath, untouched and clean. It was as if the face had never been there at all. The coroner refused to sign the final report until a second examination was done. The second doctor lasted less than 5 minutes before stepping away from the table. Pale and shaking, he later admitted that something about the corpse felt wrong, not cursed. Not violent, but incomplete, like a sentence that ended before the meaning could form. By the end of the week, another truck driver disappeared on the same road. Then another. Each vehicle was found the same way, engine off, doors locked, no damage, and each time, the face was missing. Always clean, always silent, always final. Police closed the road at night, but enforcement faded quickly. People in the countryside learned to avoid danger long before the law arrived. By sunset, no one walked near the rubber forest. Even animals refused to cross it. Dogs would stop at the tree line, whining, tails low, as if something unseen stood in their path. What unsettled the villagers most was not the deaths themselves, but the pattern that followed. Every victim had spoken of seeing someone on the road shortly before dying. A man in white, standing still, watching, and in every testimony, there was a pause, an involuntary hesitation, before the witness described the face. Some said it was blank. Others said it was blurred. One old farmer whispered that the face was missing because it had already been taken. The elders began to say the road was no longer just a road. It had become a place where something waited. Something that did not kill out of anger. Something that took what it lacked.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 3. The House at the End of the Road. At the far end of the road, where the red soil darkened and the rubber trees grew too close together, stood an old wooden house that no map had bothered to name. It leaned slightly to one side, as if the ground beneath it had grown tired of holding its weight. The walls were made of aged teak, blackened by rain and time. The windows were sealed shut from the inside, yet the curtains behind them moved as though someone still lived there. No one had entered that house for decades. The elders said it once belonged to a former ritual master, a man who practiced old forms of Thai spiritual binding, rites passed down orally. Never written, never meant to be completed. He lived alone, shunned by the village, surviving on offerings left at the edge of the forest. They said he was obsessed with one fear above all others: to be forgotten. According to fragments of testimony passed down in whispers, the man believed that identity, one's face, name, and recognition, was the final anchor to existence. Lose those, and the soul would neither reincarnate nor dissolve. It would remain trapped between states, unseen and incomplete. The night the house burned, villagers reported seeing no flames, only smoke. Black, thick smoke that poured upward in the shape of a standing figure. When it cleared, the house remained, untouched by fire, but the ritual master was gone. What replaced him was something else. Years later, when authorities finally forced their way inside, they found no furniture, no shrine, no remains. Only markings carved deeply into the wooden floor, symbols of erasure, binding, and denial. At the center of the room was a circular stain, darker than the rest of the wood, as if something had been removed repeatedly from that exact spot. A monk who examined the house refused to stay past dusk. Before leaving, he spoke only once. This place was not meant to hold a body. It was meant to strip one away. After that, the sightings began to make sense. The road did not create the man without a face. It merely led people to him. And once someone reached the end, once they truly saw him, the house would no longer be empty. Something would walk back out. Chapter 4. The first one WHO spoke to him. The first person to encounter the man without a face and remain alive was a woman named Molly. She sold grilled bananas and sticky rice by the roadside during the day and slept wherever night found her. No family, no permanent home. People like Molly learned early how to notice things others ignored: changes in air, shifts in silence, the way darkness could feel heavier in certain places. On the night she met him, rain began without warning. The forest swallowed the sound quickly, turning each drop into a dull, smothered rhythm. Molly pushed her cart toward the old wooden house at the end of the road, planning to wait out the storm beneath its extended roof. She told herself she would not look inside. Everyone knew better than that. She was halfway through eating cold rice when she felt it. Not a sound. A presence. The rain no longer touched her skin. Something stood close enough to block it. Slowly, unwillingly, Molly raised her head. A man stood less than an arm's length away. White shirt, dark trousers, bare feet sinking slightly into the red mud. His posture was wrong, not tense, not relaxed, but carefully arranged, as if each limb had been placed there deliberately. Then she saw where his face should have been. There were no shadows where eyes might exist, no curve where a mouth should form, just smooth, pale skin, stretched too evenly across the front of his head. The surface reflected the dim lantern light like damp clay. Molly tried to scream. Her throat closed. The man leaned forward, not threatening, not hurried, curious, studying her the way a craftsman studies an object he intends to use. And then, without lips, without breath, he spoke. "Let me borrow yours." The voice did not come from the air. It formed directly inside her head, heavy and intimate, as if it had always been there and was only now choosing to speak. Molly ran. She did not remember standing, or pushing past him, or reaching the road. She only remembered the feeling of her own skin pulling tight across her face. as though it were no longer properly attached. She did not look back. But she knew, without seeing, that he was still standing there. Watching. Waiting. From that night on, Molly avoided mirrors. And yet, every time she closed her eyes, she could still feel his gaze. Not on her body. On her face.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 5. The Dream They All Shared. The dream did not come to Molly alone. Within days of her encounter, others along the road began to speak of it, quietly at first, as if afraid that saying the words aloud might make the dream return sooner. Truck drivers, night watchmen, a pair of teenagers who had dared each other to ride past the forest after midnight. All of them described the same thing. They dreamed of a room with no windows. The walls were bare, the air was thick and unmoving. At the center of the room stood a mirror, tall and narrow, its surface slightly warped, as if it had been exposed to heat. In the dream, they approached the mirror without fear. At first, their reflection moved normally, blink for blink, breath for breath. Everything was familiar, comforting even. Then something went wrong. The reflection began to lag. Just a fraction of a second, so small it was almost dismissible. But the delay grew heavier with each movement, until the reflection no longer felt like an echo. It felt like a separate presence trying to imitate life. Then the reflection stopped moving altogether. The body in the mirror remained still, staring forward, while the dreamer continued to breathe on the other side. And slowly, impossibly, the face in the reflection began to loosen. It did not tear. It did not bleed. It slid, peeling downward as a single, wet layer, folding over itself as it fell to the floor. The sound it made was soft and intimate, like skin being pulled free from warm glass. The dream always ended before anyone could look down. They woke up gasping, hands pressed instinctively to their faces, checking, counting, features in the dark. Eyes, nose, mouth, still there. But something had changed. Those who shared the dream reported the same sensation afterward. Their faces felt unfamiliar. Not numb, not painful, just distant, as if the connection between skin and self had weakened. When they smiled, the expression felt delayed. When they touched their cheeks, the warmth felt borrowed. Molly experienced the dream on the third night. She woke before dawn, heart pounding, her face slick with sweat. When she reached for the cracked mirror beside her sleeping mat, her hand froze inches from the surface. In the dim reflection, her eyes were open, but they were not blinking when she did. From that moment on, the elders stopped calling it a dream. They called it a warning, because everyone who dreamed it had already been seen. And once the man without a face noticed you, he never forgot where you were. Chapter 6. When the skin began to change. The changes did not happen all at once. That was what made them unbearable. At first, it was only a sensation, a faint tightness beneath the skin, as though the face had been wrapped too firmly in something invisible. People described it as waking up after sleeping in an awkward position. Except the stiffness never faded. Molly noticed it while washing her face in a roadside restroom. The water was cold, the mirror was cracked. When she pressed her palms against her cheeks, the skin did not move the way it used to. It resisted slightly, like damp paper clinging to glass. She rubbed harder, expecting warmth or pain. There was neither. Instead, the skin along her hairline wrinkled unnaturally, forming thin folds that did not belong to any expression. Then, without warning, a narrow strip of it loosened. It peeled. Not violently. Not suddenly. The skin lifted at the edge and separated with a sound too soft to be real. Like silk sliding over itself. Molly screamed and stumbled back, clutching her face, but there was no blood, no wound. Beneath it was another layer of skin. Paler. Colder. Smooth in a way that felt manufactured rather than grown. The sensation was wrong, not pain, but displacement, as if what had been revealed was not hers, and what had peeled away had never truly belonged to her either. Others reported similar moments. A man found his reflection smiling while his own mouth remained still. A woman felt her lips stiffen, then relax, as though something else were practicing their movement. One boy claimed his shadow had developed a face before he did. Doctors could offer nothing. Tests showed healthy tissue, normal nerve responses, no signs of infection or disease. And yet every patient described the same thing: the feeling that their face was no longer entirely attached to their identity, as if it were being tried on. At night, Molly began to feel pressure behind her eyes, not inside her skull, but behind the skin itself. When she lay down, the sensation worsened, as though something were standing close, observing, memorizing. She learned not to touch her face in the dark, because when she did, it felt slightly unfamiliar, as if someone else had already held it there.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 7. The One Step Behind. It always began the same way. A subtle shift in awareness, like realizing a sound had stopped without knowing when it started. Those who had been marked would pause mid-step, mid-breath, struck by the certainty that something had moved closer without making a sound. One step behind. Never more. Never less. Molly felt it first while walking through the morning market. The air was loud with voices and metal clanging against metal. Yet the sensation followed her precisely, unaffected by the crowd. Whenever she slowed, it slowed. Whenever she stopped, it stopped. She told herself it was fear, exhaustion, the residue of the dreams. But fear does not keep perfect distance. At night, the presence became heavier. It did not touch her. It did not breathe. It simply occupied space, a narrow pocket of air directly behind her head, where warmth should have been but was not. Those who turned too quickly sometimes caught a glimpse. Not a full shape, just the suggestion of one. A pale surface retreating from sight, a smooth curve where features refused to exist. The mind would scramble to fill the gaps. And that was when people screamed, not because of what they saw, but because of what their thoughts tried to supply. An old guard claimed he saw hands hanging at his sides, fingers twitching as if remembering how to move. A woman said the thing behind her had leaned in, close enough that she could feel the weight of its attention pressing against the back of her skull. No one ever felt breath. That absence was worse. Molly learned to walk slowly, to turn gradually, never allowing panic to jerk her body around. She avoided reflective surfaces, avoided shadows, avoided standing still for too long. Stillness seemed to please it. Sometimes, in moments of exhaustion, she felt a faint tug at her cheeks, as though something invisible were measuring them, memorizing their shape. The elders warned them never to ask it questions, never to acknowledge it aloud, because attention, once returned, became invitation. And the man without a face was patient. He did not chase. He followed, always one step behind, waiting for the moment when the face in front of him would finally stop feeling like it belonged to someone else. Chapter 8. The monk Who would not look. The monk arrived from Bangkok just before dusk. He was older than most had expected, thin, stooped, with a shaven head marked by age and sun rather than ritual scars. He did not ask to see the road. He did not ask to hear every story. He listened once, briefly, then asked only one question. How many of them still have dreams? No one answered at first. That silence was enough. The monk insisted on being taken near the edge of the rubber forest. But he refused to step onto the road itself. Instead, he sat cross-legged on the red soil, facing away from the trees. When asked why he would not look toward the house, he replied calmly, "Some things become real the moment they are acknowledged." He closed his eyes and began to chant. The words were old, older than the temple that taught them. The air around him seemed to tighten, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. Molly stood several meters away, hands clenched at her sides, fighting the familiar pressure behind her face. Halfway through the chant, the monk stopped. His voice faltered, not in fear, but in recognition. Without opening his eyes, he spoke. "It is not a ghost." The villagers shifted uneasily. "It is not a spirit that died and lingered. This thing was never allowed to finish dying." He explained that in certain forbidden rites, identity itself could be bound and denied. A face was not merely flesh, it was recognition, memory, and permission to pass from one state to another. To erase a face was to sever the soul from the cycle entirely. "What walks that road?" The monk said softly, is a being without conclusion. It could not be reborn. It could not dissolve. It could not be remembered as human. So it wandered, searching for what it lacked. The face it seeks is not only skin, he continued, it is continuity, a way to exist without tearing reality further. Someone asked if it could be destroyed. The monk shook his head. You cannot kill what was never permitted to die. When he finally opened his eyes, Molly felt the presence behind her retreat slightly, just enough to be noticed. The monk stood and prepared to leave before nightfall. As he passed Molly, he paused. Do not let it finish learning your expressions, he said quietly. Once it can move your face without thinking, you will already be gone. Then he left. And for the first time since the dreams began, Molly understood something worse than fear. She understood that the man without a face was not hunting. He was practicing.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 9. The ones WHO came back wrong. The missing did not stay missing. That was the part no one expected. At first, the village prepared for funerals, empty ones. Clothes were folded, names were whispered, offerings were placed at doorways, waiting for spirits that might never return. But then, one by one, people came back. They walked into the village at dawn or near sunset, appearing at the edge of the road as if stepping out of a fog that only they could see. Their bodies were unharmed, their clothes were dusty but intact. They greeted neighbors by name. Yet no one felt relief. Because something was undeniably wrong. Their faces were almost right. The eyes were in the correct place. The mouth moved when words were spoken, but expressions arrived a moment too late. Like poorly synchronized reflections, smiles felt rehearsed, blinks lasted too long. When they listened, their faces did not react, only their voices did. A mother stared at her returned son for hours before whispering, "You don't look at me the way you used to." He tilted his head, as if considering how to respond. "I am looking," he said. But his eyes did not change. Those who came back never slept deeply. They lay still for hours, breathing shallowly, faces slack and unfinished. When touched unexpectedly, their skin felt cool, lacking the subtle warmth of a living body. Some villagers swore they heard faint movements at night, soft stretching sounds, like skin being adjusted. No mirrors survived in the homes of the returned. Not because the villagers broke them, because the returned refused to be near them. One man smashed a bathroom mirror with his bare hands after catching his reflection smiling before he did. He stood shaking amid the glass, pressing his palms against his cheeks, begging something unseen to stop pulling. Doctors could find no illness. Monks could offer no blessing strong enough to restore what had been taken. The returned were not possessed. They were occupied. Molly watched them carefully. She noticed how they studied other people's faces, lingering too long. Memorizing curves and movements, she noticed how they stood too close, how their gaze traced cheekbones, lips, eyelids. And she understood. These were not victims. They were intermediaries. Each stolen face did not end the curse. It multiplied it. Because the man without a face did not wear them forever. He learned from them. And once he finished learning, he moved on, leaving behind something that could walk, speak, and remember names, but no longer remembered how it felt to be human. Chapter 10. There was never just one. The truth revealed itself slowly, not as a revelation but as an accumulation of small, unbearable details. It began with numbers. At first, the villagers believed there was only one man without a face, one presence tied to the road, the forest, the house at the end. One mistake made long ago that had learned how to walk. But the sightings did not behave like a single thing. People reported being followed in different places at the same time. One presence near the riverbank, another behind a closed market stall, a third standing motionless at the edge of a schoolyard just before dawn. Gone the moment the bell rang. Always the same distance. Always one step behind. Molly realized the truth when she saw two of them. She had gone to the old bus stop at dusk, drawn there by a feeling she no longer tried to resist. As she stood alone, staring at the empty road, she sensed the familiar pressure behind her. Then she felt it again. From the side. She did not turn. She did not need to. The weight of attention multiplied, pressing in from two directions, each presence careful not to touch the other. That was when she understood. The man without a face did not divide. He replicated. Every stolen face was not an ending, it was a beginning. Each incomplete being left behind carried enough of him to continue the process. Enough memory, enough hunger. The monk's warning returned to her with new clarity. He was practicing. The returned villagers were not failed attempts. They were lessons. Each one taught the curse how to move more naturally, speak more convincingly, blend in more perfectly. Soon, the elders noticed something else. Children began reporting dreams. Not the mirror dream, not yet. Instead, they dreamed of standing behind someone, close enough to feel warmth, close enough to see every detail of a face without being seen themselves. They woke confused, hands hovering near their own cheeks. The road was sealed completely after that. Boards, chains, warnings, but the presences did not need the road anymore. They had learned distance. They had learned patience. They had learned how to wait where people felt safest. Molly felt the pressure behind her face grow stronger each night, as if something inside her were being measured, rehearsed, prepared. She understood then that the village was already lost. Not because the man without a face was unstoppable, but because there were now too many places he could stand, and too many faces he could learn to wear.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 11. The Night Without Mirrors. The decision was not discussed. It emerged, like a shared instinct rising from the same fear. The villagers began removing mirrors from their homes before anyone gave the order. Bathroom mirrors were wrapped in cloth. Handheld mirrors were smashed behind houses. Storefront glass was boarded up or covered with old posters and fabric. By nightfall, the village no longer reflected itself. The monk's words echoed in everyone's mind. Recognition makes it real. Mirrors, they believed, were invitations, a surface where practice became permission. That night, no one slept properly. Without reflections, the village felt distorted. People moved carefully, uncertain of their own expressions. They avoided looking at one another too long, afraid that imitation might begin without warning. Faces were kept low, half-lit by oil lamps and candles. Molly felt worse than ever. Without mirrors, she could no longer check whether her face was still obeying her. The pressure beneath her skin intensified, especially around the eyes and mouth. Smiling felt delayed, blinking felt optional. And still, he stood behind her. She felt him clearly that night. Not one. Several. They kept their distance, respectful in their way, like students waiting for instruction. For the first time, Molly sensed something else beneath the hunger. Anticipation. As darkness deepened, sounds spread through the village, soft, irregular footsteps where no one stood. The subtle noise of skin shifting, stretching, learning. Some villagers swore they heard whispers forming without words, like breath remembering how to become speech. A child screamed near midnight. When adults reached him, he pointed at his sleeping mother and sobbed, saying her face had forgotten to come back after she closed her eyes. She woke confused, touching her cheeks repeatedly, whispering her own name like a prayer. By dawn, the village looked unfamiliar. Not because of damage, but because of restraint. No reflections, no certainty, no proof of who still belonged to themselves. The elders knew then that this was not a solution. It was a delay. Breaking the mirrors had not stopped the man without a face. It had only slowed his education. And as the sun rose, casting long shadows across a village that refused to see itself, Molly understood something quietly, with a clarity that frightened her more than any presence. If this continued, there would come a night when no one needed mirrors anymore. Because there would be nothing left to recognize. Chapter 12. What was buried beneath the house? The house at the end of the road was never meant to be opened again. But desperation has a way of making taboos feel optional. At dawn, a small group of villagers followed the elders into the rubber forest. No monks accompanied them, no prayers were spoken aloud. They carried only tools and the quiet understanding that whatever waited beneath the house had already seen them. The floorboards resisted at first, swollen by age and moisture. When they finally gave way, The air that rose from beneath the house was cold and sour, carrying the unmistakable smell of damp earth mixed with something far worse. Human. They dug until the soil turned dark. Then they struck stone. A rectangular slab lay buried directly beneath the center of the house, carved with symbols so worn they seemed older than language. It took 6 men to lift the lid. When they did, no one screamed. Screaming would have required surprise. Inside the stone coffin were faces. Not skulls. Not bodies. Faces. They were layered carefully, stacked like offerings. Some were dried and cracked with age. Others were soft, pale, and disturbingly intact, as if removed only days before. Eyelids twitched faintly on one of them, responding to light that should not have mattered anymore. Someone dropped the lantern. In the brief darkness, Molly felt the pressure behind her intensify, sharp and eager, as though something had leaned forward to look. The elders understood then. The ritual master had not created the curse and death. He had been maintaining it in life. Each face was a denial, a stolen conclusion, a way to keep something unfinished bound to the world. The coffin was not a grave, it was a reservoir. And it was no longer full. When the lantern was relit, one face near the top was missing. No one had touched it. No one had moved. The stone lid began to vibrate softly, not from force, but from adjustment, like something inside was settling into a more comfortable position. They sealed the coffin in silence. As they left the house, Molly lagged behind, her legs heavy, her face numb in a way she could no longer ignore. She felt a sudden, overwhelming certainty that something essential had shifted. The curse had not been released. It had been redistributed. That night, for the first time, Molly dreamed of the coffin instead of the mirror. And in the dream, she was not looking down at the faces. She was lying among them. Awake. Waiting.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 13. The one WHO returned. Molly disappeared 2 nights after the coffin was sealed. There was no scream, no sign of struggle. The mat where she slept was undisturbed. Her sandals still placed neatly beside it, as if she had stood up calmly and walked away without urgency. The village did not search. Everyone already knew where she had gone. 3 days later, she came back. She walked in from the road just before sunrise, barefoot, clothes damp with morning mist. Her posture was steady, her breathing even. She greeted the first villager she saw by name and asked, politely, if there was any food left. At first glance, she looked normal. Too normal. Her face showed no strain, no exhaustion, no fear. The lines that had once appeared around her eyes were gone, smoothed away into something younger and less specific. When she smiled, the movement was precise, carefully shaped, like a gesture practiced in private. People stepped aside to let her pass. No one hugged her. No one asked where she had been. They watched. Molly moved through the village as if relearning it. She paused slightly before doors, before corners, before speaking, tiny delays that suggested calculation rather than hesitation. When she listened, her face remained neutral, attentive in a way that felt studied. At night, those who slept near her reported sounds. Soft sounds. Not footsteps. Not breathing. Stretching. As if skin were being adjusted repeatedly, smoothed and repositioned until it fit just right. One woman swore she saw Molly standing alone outside her hut before dawn, gently pulling at her cheeks with both hands, tilting her head as if checking symmetry. When Molly noticed her watching, she stopped immediately. Is something wrong? She asked. Her voice was gentle. Her eyes were not. Molly no longer dreamed of mirrors. She no longer felt the presence one step behind. Instead, she felt something else, something closer, something settled. Sometimes, when no one was looking, her face would slip. Just slightly. A corner of her mouth lagging behind her words, her eyes fixing forward while her head turned. In those moments, the skin across her face appeared too smooth, too continuous, like a surface that had not yet learned how to crease. The elders understood then. Molly was not possessed. She had been completed. What wore her face no longer needed to follow. It no longer needed to practice. It had found a form convincing enough to walk freely. And somewhere beneath that borrowed skin, something else, something unfinished, was now standing one step behind someone new. Chapter 14. The face that moved too slowly. I did not intend to become part of this story. At first, I was only recording it, writing names, dates, patterns. I told myself distance was protection, observation without belief, but belief does not ask permission. And distance means nothing to something that measures faces rather than bodies. I began noticing it in the mirror. Not immediately. At first, it was a harmless delay. A blink that lingered half a second longer than it should have. A smile that seemed to finish forming after I had already felt it in my muscles. I blamed fatigue, fear, the influence of too many nights spent listening to other people's terror. Then one morning, my reflection did not yawn when I did. It watched. The eyes in the mirror remained open, fixed forward, studying my face with an intensity I had seen before, on Molly. Just before she disappeared, I stood frozen, counting silently, waiting for the reflection to move. It did. One beat too late. I stopped using mirrors after that, but the damage had already begun. I felt the pressure at night, not behind me, but inside my awareness, as if something had shifted from following to observing from a closer position. My dreams change. No mirror, no coffin. Instead, I dreamed of standing behind someone else, close enough to feel the warmth of their skin, close enough to memorize the way their face responded to thought. When I woke, my cheeks felt tight. Practiced. I began to understand something the elders never said aloud. The curse did not spread through the road, or the house, or even the faces in the coffin. It spread through attention. By listening. By recording. By remembering. Each time I wrote the words "man without a face," I felt the shape of my own features become slightly less certain. As if naming him allowed him to confirm his work. Tonight, I stood briefly before a darkened window. The glass reflected just enough for me to see an outline. My outline. It moved. But not quite with me. I am writing this now because I do not know how much longer the delay will last. I do not know when my expressions will begin arriving without me. If you are reading this, and you feel your face grow tense for no reason, stop. Do not look for confirmation. Do not check. Because once you notice the delay, it is no longer a mistake. It is a rehearsal.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 15. The 1WHO continues. You will think this is the end. Most people do. Stories like this are supposed to close neatly, sealed by distance and disbelief. A final paragraph, a last warning, the comfort of knowing that whatever happened stayed where it belonged. But this story was never meant to end. Because it was not written to be remembered. It was written to be continued. I know now that the man without a face never needed the road, or the house, or even the coffin beneath it. Those were tools, crutches, training grounds. What he truly needed was recognition, attention that lingered just long enough to let him learn. That is why he waited. That is why he practiced. That is why he allowed people to survive. When I stopped writing, the pressure did not leave. It settled, calm, certain. I no longer feel him one step behind me. I no longer feel watched. Because watching implies distance. Instead, there are moments, small, unremarkable ones, when my face responds before I do. A smile forming without intent. A blink arriving early. Expressions that feel correct, yet unchosen. I understand now. He does not take a face all at once. He replaces it gradually, expression by expression, habit by habit, until nothing abrupt needs to happen at all. No disappearance, no scream, no missing skin. Just continuity. You may be wondering why you are still reading. Why your eyes keep moving even though something in you wants to stop. That hesitation, that faint tension across your cheeks, your brow, your jaw, is not fear. It is recognition. You are checking your face right now, even if you do not move your hands, counting without thinking, measuring responsiveness, waiting for confirmation that everything still belongs to you. That moment. That is where he begins. Do not look for proof. Do not test your reflection. Do not try to catch the delay. Because the man without a face is no longer walking the road. He is standing very still. Learning. And the next face he finishes will not vanish. It will sit where you are now. Reading. Continuing. If this story stayed with you, that means it worked. Don't worry. Just don't check your reflection tonight. Some things begin the moment you make sure everything is still there. Good night. And whatever you do, don't look too closely.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.